You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Well, hello again, everyone. I'm glad you're spending a minute to check in with us. This is Doug Thorpe, and this is another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. I'm very honored today to bring a guest who is a author, an advisor and coach. He also has a wildly successful TED Talk that has achieved 1.5 million views in less than a year. And his name is Michael Timms. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Doug. Really happy to be here.
I typically ask my guests, Michael, to give us just a quick flyover backstory of your journey to get to where you are, and most importantly, what inspired this work you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah. What inspired this work is I went to school. I went to school for finance and just discovered that I actually was more, I read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People when I was in university. And I'm like, oh, this is the type of work that I want to be doing. And so I decided to get into human resources, thinking that would kind of take me into that direction. Fast forward 15 years later, I was doing none of that. It was all compensation, benefits, policy, and stuff like that, and recruiting. But during that period of time, when I was working in industry, I had 5 different managers throughout my career, and they progressively got worse. Like the first guy, great guy, solid leader, cared about me. Second guy, good guy, cared about me a little bit less, anyways, until the last guy was just brutal. And I remember thinking, I don't want anybody to feel the way that this guy is making me feel. And I wanted to go back to organizational behavior leadership and help organizations develop their people in their leadership positions to be great leaders, because obviously, not only was it having an emotional impact on me, it was having a tremendous performance impact on me, right? I was not performing well, and neither was, everybody else. Everybody was scared of this guy. When you're scared of your leader, you're going to be afraid of making mistakes. You're not going to be, being proactive. You're not going to be taking an initiative. Like, I'm not going to do anything until this guy tells me what to do, because if I don't do it right, he's going to get mad at me, right? So we were all underperforming under this guy. And so not only is it the human impact that I'm concerned about, I really help organizations create a high performance culture through better leadership.
Several things packed in there that I can definitely relate to and have spoken about in times past. It's one is that evolution of leadership, and I talk about this a lot, and I see it everywhere. It still lives to this day. We as a company may have a need for a frontline supervisor, team leader. So what do? We pick the brightest bulb in the string.
Right, exactly.
And we anoint them as a leader, and all of a sudden now they got management responsibilities. Well, I don't know statistically, I can't say that I've read studies, but my gut sense and anecdotal experience tells me that you probably miss that call at least half of the time. And what that means is that great superstar performer is not necessarily cut out to be a people leader, and might not even be that great in so-called management responsibilities. But nonetheless, they muddle through it, they create some results, and they get promoted again.
Yeah.
And now they're in the management track, and maybe or maybe not, they get identified as a high potential with a play in the succession planning. But it's usually about the 3rd or 4th promotion that companies finally wake up and say, maybe we ought to give this person some help. Maybe we ought to get them a coach, get them some training, get them some support to be the right kind of leader.
Yeah, actually, and that's been my experience as well. That people, and the funny thing is these people, they end up being in senior leadership positions for many, many years, and which gives them this feeling like, well, I know what I'm doing because I've been doing it for so many years. I'm such a great boss, such a great leader, right? Everybody, they gave me the world's greatest boss mug, so they must, they laugh at my jokes. Everybody loves me. I'm a great leader. I don't need any help. And again, because I've been doing this all for so many years, but there's been research around this that, I think people tend to get promoted into their leadership position within the first 7 to 10 years of their career. And the first time that they get any kind of formal leadership training is kind of well into, 15 years later.
Right.
And it's
Exactly.
just like, how, how can we possibly expect to be giving our people the best that they can have to set them up for success when we're not training, the people in leadership positions until they've been muddling their way through it for perhaps a decade or more. So,
Yeah. Well, and so let's talk briefly. Let's just kind of recap, or if you can, give us the highlight focal point of your TED Talk that is being so wildly embraced.
sure. The the focus of my TED Talk is really this. And I'll just give you a little bit of backstory. A lot of times when people come to me, they know that I help organizations embrace accountability, and so and high performance. And so they come to me and they say, "Hey, the CEO comes to me and says, Michael, um, how can you help my organization, or can you help my organization be, embrace accountability?" And I know I can tell what they're thinking is, Michael, can you make my employees be more accountable, take greater ownership for problems and solutions? And they're thinking, can you fix my people? Or can you enhance their performance? And I'm like, well, sure, but it starts with you, right? And if you are not getting ideal performance out of your people, then odds are there are things that you are doing or not doing that are reducing their effectiveness. And I'm going to help you and your executive team, behave in the right ways to produce the results that you want to produce in your people, and the results that they produce. So the essence of the TEDx talk is, you can't inspire accountability in others until you model it yourself. Now, of course, people in leadership positions feel that they are already modeling those accountability, right? As we have already discussed. And my message to them is, I'm sure you are. I know you are. You wouldn't be in the position that you're in if you weren't already modeling accountability to pretty high degree. But the things that I can show you just a few really high impact behaviors that will help you model accountability to an even higher degree. And it's this example, as you take your level of accountability to a higher degree, it's that difference that actually inspires other people to step up their game. So that's the central message of the TEDx talk.
And again, in my experience, there's so many things that factor into the ability to effectively lead a team and get the best out of them. And there was probably a major seminal study done by Google. It's now, they were the ones that I think first rolled out the phrase psychological safety. And ultimately that comes down to this ability to build a kind of trust. And without the trust, you can't really, pardon the phrase, it's totally politically, socially wrong to say it this way, but I will anyway. You can't buggy whip somebody into compliance and accountability.
Right.
There's only so many times you can threaten them with their existence on the payroll before you're talking to a blank page and they've totally tuned out. So it to me, it involves so much more in the way of pulling people along rather than pushing them in a direction.
Yeah, and the word accountability, that's one of the things that I fight. That's a challenge in creating cultures of accountability. Is a lot of times people have negative associations because they feel like people are, the only time they hear the word accountability is when they're not doing what they should be doing, and their managers are going to come and beat them with the accountability stick. And so that's not the right way of using the term accountability. As a matter of fact, that's an incorrect way of using accountability. Accountability is, when people use the term, or we hear the term in popular culture or in the news, it's typically, we need to hold this person accountable, right? And really, what they're doing is they're just using that word accountability as a euphemism, or as a nicer way, or a more professional sounding way of, that person is to blame and they should be punished. But that's really what they're saying when they're using that term accountability, which is totally incorrect. Accountability is, blame is what we do when we don't want to take accountability ourselves, right?
Right.
But accountability is taking ownership of results and focusing on what you can do, not what Doug can do, not what this person can do, not what this person can do, but what I can do to improve future results. That is accountability. And so if we can get organizations to start using the definition of accountability correctly, and not using it as something to beat people over the head with, you're going to have far less resistance when you try to create a culture of accountability.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that is rising to the level of better performance, better results, et cetera. It comes from the idea of something that I talk about in one of my books, but I want to run it by you. I want to get your take on this and see if you agree, have a different spin, different view, different experience. The premise is this: everybody that joins your team has the ability to operate fundamentally in two gears. The first gear is tell me my job description, show me the work, teach me the systems. I'll comply.
Yeah.
And so if an employee fulfills their job description on a day by day basis, the argument says you're going to get results because you designed the job to create a certain value for the company. So if it's fulfilled to the letter, you're going to get results. Okay, that's great. But the second gear is something I refer to as discretionary effort. It's that person's willingness to go above and beyond, the classic extra mile, 110%, however you want to call it. It's that notion there's something exciting about working here that I as an individual can relate to, I can align with, I can help fuel my sense of purpose and being. And I'm willing to do certain things. If they don't even ask me, I'm going to just show up and do it. And it's that second gear zone that I try to encourage leaders that I work with to think about. And it's different in all companies and at all levels. But it's kind of the idea of what would it look like if 9 out of 10 of your people were operating in that second gear as opposed to just that baseline first gear?
The difference between doing what you are supposed to do and giving discretionary effort, that's what I call the difference between responsibility and accountability.
Mm.
So I think responsibility is fairly well defined. We understand what responsibility means. Like, look, if this is your job description, if you're doing everything on your job description, you're a responsible person and you're doing everything that you, quote, should be doing. But discretionary effort is caring less about doing the activities and caring more about achieving the right results. And that's the difference between accountability and responsibility. I define responsibility by taking ownership of activities or tasks, okay? Accountability is taking ownership of results. I've just had a very personal example of dealing with this. The internet went out in my office. The internet company made a mistake, disconnected me by mistake. And it's been a nightmare dealing with the telecenter people trying to get my internet connected when they were the ones that made the mistake, right? Or the company was. And it's the people who, my job is, it says in my job description that if I don't know the answer, if it's not clear, I just need to pass them off to somebody else. And we all know, we've all been through that in the a telecenter, that they just like, well, let me connect you with the right department. Let me connect you with the right, and we've been all through that runaround, right? And those are people who are like, I'm just going to do what's in the scope. That's my job description says I need to do this. And I'm just, right. It's when you get that one person who's like, Michael, I don't know how to fix your problem right now, but I'm going to stick with you to the end. I'm going to stick with you until we have a resolution. That is an accountable person. And I think a lot of organizations, I mean, do you know that your people, like, do you see that in your people? Like, do you see that the people in your organization do they think that their job is simply to be responsible and to simply check the boxes off of their to-do list? Or do you have people who believe that their job is to make sure that the customer gets what we have promised to deliver that customer? And if it's the latter, and if you really believe that if that's what you want, then you need to get clear with your employees that they were not hired to simply be responsible and to do the things on their job description. That is not what they were hired for. Every person on the planet that I know of was hired to produce certain results. But as managers and people in senior leadership positions, we're often not clear about that distinction. And which gives people a total out. And they can say, well, I did what you told me to do. I did what was on my job description, and it's not on me. You are accountable. The results are on you, boss. Well, we've done that as leaders. We have trained people to behave that
I think
way.
that way. Yeah.
When we keep focusing them and teaching them that their job is simply to do a list of tasks, how often do leaders actually say, you know what? I hired you to basically produce 3 results. All I need you to do is to consistently produce these 3 results. Here are some guidelines about how you can use to get those results, but those are the results that I have hired you to produce. How often do leaders speak in those types of terms? Not often in my experience, but if they did, I can guarantee you would be far more likely to get the results that you want to get.
Yeah. I have a quick story about that mentality, and it goes back to my banking days. I was leading a large group, and I don't know, it was 60 to 90 employees, something like that. And I was always on the hot seat with HR because the company policy said everybody, regardless whether you're salaried or otherwise, you're going to fill out a time card, and we're going to do time tracking. And all of my crew at the time, and this is, I don't want to get into the legal, aspects of what the federal law might say about wage and labor. That's not the point. But the point was my team was elevated. Most of them were the so-called exempt status. They didn't get paid overtime, but they were doing high value work for the bank. And my attitude was, and I told my team this, I'm not going to watch the clock. Yes, we open the doors at 8 and we will generally close by 5. But, what you need to do, I want to focus on the value we're delivering to the people we're serving. And let's talk about what that looks like. And on your desk with your book of business, if you can get all that done in half the time of somebody else, I don't care. I'm okay with that. And and as a consequence, we had a very high production rate. We had really good statistics on any of the KPIs you might want to measure about what we were supposed to be doing, volume wise and otherwise. But we also had a culture of serving our clients at a higher level, kind of going back to your example. We were not a call center, but we were supporting bank officers throughout our network. And when a bank officer called in and said, I've got a problem with a particular transaction, my people were used to carrying it to the end until we got a successful resolution. But I was perpetually in the hot seat with HR because I refused to submit time cards.
Well, there's something implied, I think, in that story about how you got those results. In addition to focusing your team members on delivering the results, what results they were hired to deliver? It was to deliver the results that the client was expecting, right? And so obviously you were probably pretty clear on that. But the other way to get that discretionary effort is nobody is going to care about the client until they feel that their manager cares about them. And that's how you're going to get that discretionary effort, is if they know that Doug cares about me, as much, if not more than, getting those right results. It's like when you get on a plane, the very first thing that they do is they tell you in the safety orientation, put your own air mask on before you attempt to help others. It's a natural sequence of events. We cannot effectively care for others until our own needs have been met.
Right.
And so I think that's an important thing to point out in that story. Although you didn't say it, I can tell that in order to get those kind of results, those people had to had to have a feeling that they felt that Doug cares about me and my needs are met. Therefore, I can go out on a limb. I can maybe call my wife and say, "Hey, I am going to be a little bit late for dinner tonight, but that's okay, because there's a give and take, right? Because I got to do this thing for work, and I know, Doug has got my back in times that I'm going to need to leave early or, whatever it is, right?
Right. And that is what was manifested in that. And there was communication about that. The ideas of, if you've got a challenge at home, a sick child or something you need to help your spouse go do, by all means, plan around it, think about it. You need to let your team leader know where you're going to be. But, the urgency of pounding on the clock and saying, hey, you didn't do your 8 to 5, or, even it got down to the lunch privileges. There were very prescriptive rules about how long lunch was supposed to be. And I'm like, I don't care,
Right.
even if it was a matter of you're out with a colleague and you get distracted and you're there a little longer, it it is okay. I'm trusting that you're going to figure out how to get the work done in under the guides and expectations that we all have. And yeah, did I have to administer a few people that were abusing the privilege? Yes, that was true. But there were pretty visible and obvious ways to figure that out, and
Yeah.
you could deal with it accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, talk to us a little bit more about this accountability and overall performance. But let me first preface by saying, recently I read some articles through the LinkedIn chatter, and I know people may do an eye roll when I say LinkedIn as my source.
Huh.
That's another story for another day. But nonetheless, the point of this was that millennials are pushing back on the notion of talking about performance. The article asserted the idea that if you're a leader, you're gonna turn off your whole millennial band of employees if you constantly want to talk about performance. That has become a negative word in their mind, and there's this sort of mental shifting going on. I have tried to test that premise with opportunities I've got, with clients and others to see if that is in fact true, a phenomenon that is emerging, and again, very unscientific, but just somewhat anecdotal. People are kind of saying, yes, it is true. There is a pushback on that constant pressure about performance. So, first part of the question is, are you seeing any of that? Have you heard mention of that?
Well, I can see both sides of that. Number one, I mean, I remember in the banking industry, I'm from Canada, and I know you guys had this as well in the banking industry, where there's this huge push on, getting bank tellers to be salespeople, and it was just like, you got to hit your numbers, you got to hit your numbers, you got to, like that was it, right? And that was bananas. And of course, people are going to get burnt out when that's all you care about. And people know that's all you care about. And as a matter of fact, that guy I told you earlier about, that terrible boss, we knew the only thing he cared about was EBITDA or the financial results. That was all he cared about. We knew crystal clear. He did not care about us. He just cared about getting that dollar value. Now, when I talk about focusing on results, that's not what I'm talking about. Focusing on results is clarifying what is the value I'm here to provide. And if I can be clear about the value that I'm here to provide, I can perform better, right? But getting back to your notion about, is performance a dirty word? I would say, hey, let's focus on, instead of maybe talking about performance, which is really about me and it kind of has this evaluation type connotation to it. Like, I'm going to be rated, I'm going to be ranked, my performance is going to be rated and ranked and compared. Maybe let's just talk about it in terms of results and value. Like, what value am I providing? How can I provide greater value? And I think if maybe it's just a semantics thing, but I think if we talked about it in that way, with and I have to go back to with making sure that people understand that you care about them as a leader. And I don't think that people will push back about being measured, about having results measured, and talking about value and trying to quantify value. If they know that your first priority is them, are you getting what you need? Are you okay? Like, right? Are you okay? Are things okay at home? Are you okay physically? Are you okay emotionally? And are you getting what you need at work? Is work working for you? If it's not working for you, let's talk about that first before we talk about delivering value to the client, right?
Hmm.
Or to the customer. So if that's the kind of environment that you're fostering, where people know that you care about them and care about making sure that their needs are met first, I find that people are okay then saying, okay, yeah, let's quantify. Let's sort of because when we quantify our results, when we quantify the value that we're providing, we can kind of gamify this, right? Because I think most people want to do better, right? I think most people say like, "Hey, how did I do? How did we do last month? How did we do last quarter? Can we do better?" As long as they're also getting something in return. For example, let's raise our game, but here are the resources that I'm going to provide you to get even better results.
Yeah.
And what pisses people off is that when you keep upping that performance measure without giving them anything in return, and I'm not talking about compensating them for that. I'm not talking about like giving them more money, which it can be part of it. But are you giving them, if you want me to get better results, okay, what resources do I have? And what resources are you providing for me to get those better results? But
Right.
yeah, stop talking about my performance as if it's the only input. My behavior is the only input into my performance because the other thing that managers need to understand is their behavior, the manager's behavior has an even greater impact on individual performance than individual performance does.
Yep. I actually have frequently used a theory that especially when I do team level work, when I get an opportunity to work with whole teams of leaders, and they're worried about what's going on in their part of the organization, there I challenge them to think back about their experience in the dating world. And I know everybody's got some wild stories and crazy things about that, but at the core of it is this principle that you meet a person you might have an interest in, and you agree to meet up somewhere or go out somewhere. And what typically happens on that first date? It's a series of probing and questions. What kind of music do you like? What kind of food do you like to eat? Have you traveled much? Where are you from? Tell me about your family. It's a simple series of questions, and you're taking in that information as feedback. And yes, you're likely making a judgment about, can I like this person? Am I going to be interested in doing it a second time? And if it goes well, yes, you'll have a second date and so on and so on and so on. And maybe eventually that person becomes the target of your affection and, the person you think can be your partner in life. So there's a proposal. But the point is, there's a series of questions that get a little more compound and profound about where this relationship is going. I argue to my leaders, you've got the same challenge with your people. They have questions. And if you're not providing a healthy environment where their questions can be heard and discussed, you are breaking down the relationship just without ever letting it get started. And again, going to the dating analogy, imagine you're on that first date and this person's sitting across from you, and you go, "Well, hey, glad we could do this. Tell me something about your family. Where are you from?" They go, "I'm from New York," and that's it. That's all they get. And you try this a couple of times with these other questions, and you get these very simplistic one or two word answers, and not a lot of input, not a lot of collaboration, not a lot of contribution. And I think bosses have a risk of an employee coming up with a question and they get that short one word answer with no other context, no other value associated with it. And this person has the starting point of a breakdown in the trust relationship they ought to have at work. So, it again, it goes back, I think, to your point. It all needs to start with the leader. What tone are you setting? What environment are you nurturing for this ability to lean in and do better work?
You just reminded me. I mean, sometimes, leaders get people in leadership positions get, and I make that distinction, by the way. There's a difference between leaders and people in leadership positions, right? Leaders are people who other people actually want to follow. People in leadership positions are people that other people have to follow. Sorry, just wanted to clarify that.
I like it.
But I think that, when it comes to uh, going back to that discussion about performance and people having a tough time talking about performance, I think it goes back to and what you're talking about is what kind of support are you getting from your manager? Because I know a lot of times when we talk about accountability and helping other people be more accountable, I think that sometimes managers feel like that gives them the license to say, damn it, don't come to me with problems, just give me solutions, right? You figure it out, right? That's what I hired you to do. You figure it out. That is not helpful. And that is not what people are looking for. They're not looking for you. I mean, maybe some people are asking for you to solve their problems, but that's not your job. Your job is not to solve their problems for them. But your job is there to help them think through the problem until they can find their own solutions, right? That is your job. And that's the kind of support and the resources that people need. And if you're providing that, and people are okay saying, yeah, I am okay to up the ante here and to say, yeah, I want to see if I can do better next quarter. I want to see if I can do better next year. And I'm okay to quantify that because I know you've got my back and I know you are providing me the coaching and the resources. And you're doing everything you can to help me be even more successful. Heck yeah, let's measure that.
Well, I'm looking at our time here, Michael. I want to be respectful of that, both for you and for our listeners. Is there one other key point in your view of these things that we haven't touched on yet that we ought to leave with everybody before we sign out?
Yeah, actually, we haven't touched on. There's a lot in my TEDx talk, how to claim your leadership power, that really delves into some concrete behaviors about how do you actually, what can I do as a leader? How can I behave differently as a leader to inspire other people to take greater ownership of their work, to take greater ownership of problems and solutions. And I will just say, I'll just share one of those. One of those things that you can do to increase the amount of trust and respect that you have among the members of your team and yourself, and the same thing you can do to help inspire them to want to take greater ownership is to own your mistakes, is to admit your mistakes, and not just your mistakes. Like when there's a problem, for example, we are not getting the performance we need as a department. Okay. That's a problem. Okay. The way that most managers approach that is, what are you doing wrong? What can you do differently to get better results? That's the wrong way to approach this. The right way, and the way that great leaders operate, is they say, hey, you know what? We're not getting the results that we want to get as a department. Here's something that I can see here's my part in that problem. And here's my part that I can own. Here's something that I didn't do that I should have done. And if I did that, it would have helped you guys a lot more. And when the leader goes first and owns their part in problems, it makes it safe for everybody else to do the same. And that is, not only will that lead you to better results, that is one of the greatest ways that you can increase the trust and respect that you have among your teams. And so if that's one little nugget that I can leave with you, and maybe hey, that's a little insight into what's in that TEDx talk. If you wanted to learn more, there's a book that expands more on that. It's called How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability. So there you go. There's kind of one nugget that will
I love it.
tell you what you can look forward to.
Yeah, well, folks, as always, we're going to have several links in our show notes that have access to Michael's resources, his two books, and the link for the TEDx talk. We'll have that made available there. And is there a website for people to get a hold of you if they're interested in knowing more?
The easiest thing is just to Google Michael Timms.
Okay. All right. We'll have them do that as well. Well,
All
Michael,
right.
thank you so much. This is helpful. I've got a feeling it took us a little bit to get this on the book and get it scheduled. And I got a feeling there's maybe a second and third edition of this that we could probably get into. So maybe one day soon we'll figure that out as well. I'd love to have you back.
For sure. There's lots more to talk about, Doug, and it has been great chatting with you.
All right, sir. Well, thank you again. And folks, with that, we're going to wrap up. I do want to remind you we have a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, check out the archives. We're running in the 400 series now of episode count. So we've got a lot packed into those archives. But leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you feel on what you're seeing. Let me know what you're thinking. And if there's another way we can help you, feel free to share that with me as well. But for now, we're going to say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.